When you have plastic bags on the backdrop, you know something's gonna happen. You know that they don't want to stain something.
When a female narco lord is nicknamed the Crazy Witch, you can estimate the kinds of brutal acts she was involved in to earn the nickname. Yesenia Pacheco was more than a narcotics trafficker. She was a cold-blooded killer who never showed mercy to her victims. So how did she rise to power? How did she find a spot in one of the most brutal cartels in the history of Mexico? And how did she torment her rivals and victims? Stay tuned, because in this video, we will tell you the bone-chilling story of one of the most notorious female narco lords who became a menace for her rivals. Yesenia was born in Novelado, Sinaloa. She grew up in poverty, which turned her into a harsh woman. Not much else is known about her personal life and childhood, but due to her sadistic nature and thirst for blood, we can assume that she didn't have a safe and happy childhood. She joined the Gulf Cartel in 2009. Mexican cartels make millions of dollars through narcotics trafficking, kidnapping migrants and locals, and extortion. Anyone working for them can make money easily. That's exactly why it's easy for them to recruit people coming from poor backgrounds. This was also a good opportunity for Yesenia to earn some money and run far away from the poverty that had haunted her growing up. The origins of the Gulf Cartel, also known as Cartel del Golfo, can be traced to as early as the 1960s. Back then, it consisted of a few small narcotics traffickers. Juan Garcia Abrego emerged as a key member of this cartel in 1984, and he took control of the operations of narcotics smuggling from his uncle.
The guy who really kind of established the Gulf Cartel as a major narcotic smuggling organization, and specifically the cocaine trade, was a guy by the name of Juan Garcia Abrego.
Juan Garcia Abrego struck up a deal with the Cali cartel to gain control over a few routes that led from Mexico to the United States. They started making billions, but Juan was arrested in 1994 and extradited to the US. The cartel primarily ran Tamaulipas, Nuevo Leon, and Veracruz. They traded various narcotics, including cannabis and methamphetamine, but also earned wads of cash through abductions and extortions. At that time, they were known as one of the biggest and strongest criminal organizations.
Before, the Mexicans used to make just a little bit less on what they moved through their territory. Under Garcia Abrego, they began grabbing a larger portion of that, and those increased proceeds then are really what helped the Mexican cartels grow.
The society feared them. They also had money, which they used to bribe and control the local law enforcement and political authorities. This helped them ensure smooth operations all year round. Their control over government organizations prevented them from getting captured.
But with the Gulf Cartel, we have these families that are really entrenched in the community. They really are related to many, many people in the community, and that gives them kind of a wide support base. And so it's also hard to really kind of root them out.
As Tamaulipas was a key route for narcotics trafficking, many cartels wanted to capture it. This area was primarily controlled by the Gulf Cartel, but their members would often face attacks from rival cartels who wanted to conquer it.
Para todo aquel vendedor y consumidor de cristal y fentanilo, no hay perdón. Atentamente el cártel del Golfo, Grupo Escorpión.
To protect this route, the Gulf Cartel began recruiting more men. While some joined the ranks for the money and power, others were forced into it. Members of the cartel would scare and bribe people to join their organization. Some would also bring in their family members. The Gulf Cartel also applied a strategy that most other cartels hadn't thought of at that point. They began recruiting innocent-looking females like Yesenia who could work as informants. Due to their appearance, no one could ever link them to brutal cartels, so they could mingle with normal people in society, collect all the information they needed, and pass it on to their bosses. This is exactly how Yesenia joined the Gulf Cartel. An acquaintance of hers paved her way into the cartel, and she went on to create history. After Juan Garcia, his heir Ociel Cárdenas Guillén picked up the cartel operations. He strengthened the military wing of the cartel by hiring at least 31 soldiers from the Mexico Special Forces. Their expertise added more value to the cartel. They also had access to weapons that the rival cartels didn't. This made them formidable. The US State Department placed a bounty of $2 million on Cárdenas, and he was arrested in 2003. After him, Jorge Eduardo Costilla Sanchez picked up the cartel leadership in 2007. However, a power struggle appeared within different factions of the Gulf Cartel, and their military unit left their job and began operating on their own. They soon formed the infamous Los Zetas cartel.
The Gulf Cartel's been hit very hard. First, they had to split with Los Zetas, and that hurt them incredibly because Los Zetas were a very large part of the cartel and really were their enforcement arm.
After joining the Gulf Cartel in 2009, as per the norm, Yesenia initially began working as a halconi. The halcones, or the Falcons, were responsible for scouring a designated area and collecting intel for the cartel. They acted as the eyes and ears of the organization and kept tabs on law enforcement and key personnel from rival cartels. They also ensured that the group could smoothly traffic narcotics through their established channels. She was a dedicated cartel member. She impressed the higher-ups of the Gulf Cartel with her integrity. She was also very ruthless for a female narco. Her bosses were happy with her performance, and seeing how she never captured brutality, they promoted her to a sicaria, or a female hitman. The leap from a Falcon to a sicaria was not an easy one. It takes one a great deal of power, strategic thinking, and unmatched brutality to reach the higher rank, but Yesenia had done it in a much shorter period. Because of her violent acts, she earned the nickname La Güera Loca, or the Crazy Witch. Sometimes cartel politics makes it difficult for members to rise in the hierarchy, but Yesenia's performance stumped all of that. She soon turned into one of the most feared leaders of the cartel.
After Los Zetas began operating as a separate entity, they began to rival the Gulf Cartel in operations. Due to their demonstrations of brutality, Los Zetas gained popularity in a short period and soon surpassed the Gulf Cartel's reputation.
They just don't smuggle narcotics. They're also involved in extortion, kidnapping, alien smuggling, DVD and CD piracy, just many different types of crime. And because of this, they're seen as a real public menace.
The Zetas did not just kill people, they tormented them in the most viscous ways and then separated their heads from their bodies. They also went one step ahead of their rival gangs and began to display their victims in public.
They're a little bit different from other cartel organizations in that they always, they tend to be military guys first and smugglers second.
What you saw was a change in the way drug cartels fought with violence. It was no longer those gang members with shaved heads and tattoos fighting with pistols and knives. It was militarized style, fighting like military units.
They would videotape the tormenting process, take pictures during those gruesome interrogations, and spread them in public to instill fear in their minds. They would even leave bodies in the streets.
Whereas most of the trafficker groups will always resort to violence, a lot of times they kind of will try to work other ways around but before using violence. Whereas Los Zetas, it seems like the violence is kind of their first solution to everything.
As more time passed, the rivalry between the Gulf Cartel and Los Zetas grew intense. They fought over narcotics trading routes and territories, mostly over northeastern Mexico. This area was the closest to the United States, and traffickers could easily smuggle narcotics through these routes.
The three main cities in Tamaulipas bordering the U.S., which are dominated by different factions of the Gulf Cartel and the Zetas. It's a state where people show more respect to the cartels than to the authorities, and where the citizens and the law enforcement personnel live in a constant state of tension and suspicion towards one another.
The two cartels often clashed in these areas. They fought until they lost their men. Both of them were relentless and refused to let go of the territory. Many cartel members and law enforcement officers became casualties of this war. The authorities managed to capture many of these members and sent them to prison, but the rival members clashed there too. The matter had gone out of hand at this point.
Los Zetas have become kind of public enemy number one in Mexico for the Mexican public, but also for the government. And they have become the primary target for the government to attack and to take down.
Many times the locals also got caught in the war and lost their lives. None of them had any relation to either of the cartels, and they were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. The death toll began to rise, and authorities became concerned about the future of the country because of these two cartels. They would pick up anyone they suspected as rival cartel recruits and would torment them for information. They would take the lives of the victims if they were related to the rival cartels, and those who weren't, well, they'd also meet the same fate. The cartels had links in the Mexican government, which turned the war uglier. The leaders and members knew that they wouldn't have to answer to anyone for their actions, so they could do whatever they wanted. Despite the cries of the general population and tons of evidence against both the cartels, the government of Mexico turned a blind eye to their actions. Corruption ran deep in the government organizations, which put the lives of the general population in further jeopardy. As a result, the country saw one of the most horrific criminal acts in its history. The lives of 72 people were mercilessly taken away by members of Los Zetas in 2010 in the infamous San Fernando massacre.
These photos are all that's left from the massacre of 72 migrants in Mexico 10 years ago. They were mostly Central Americans, crossing Mexico to reach the US, when a criminal group lined them up and shot them in this ranch.
The incident shook the nation. International media focused on the ongoing brutalities in the country,
and made elaborate reports on the incident. Law enforcement in Mexico began to investigate the massacre. Due to their dedication and hard work, they were able to gun down the head of Los Zetas, Heriberto Lascano, in 2011.
The Mexican Navy claims to have killed the top Los Zetas drug cartel leader Heriberto Lascano, along with 2 other gang members in a shootout 80 miles from the Texan border in Mexico. Lascano, alias the Executioner, is the founder of the notorious gang, which had been implicated in a string of mass killings and kidnappings.
Even though this initially created a small rift in their operations, Los Zetas soon went back into the game and began operating without missing a beat.
Soon the rivalry between these two cartels spread outside of Tamaulipas. States such as Guerrero, Michoacan, and even Veracruz began to see daily clashes, and many lives were lost in the power struggle. Yesenia was one of the many members of the Gulf Cartel who were leading a battle against Los Zetas. She was given her own cell within the cartel. She led the factions called Las Hienas and Las Flaquitas. Both of these had violent ways of dealing with their enemies and victims. Las Hienas was also in charge of eliminating Los Zetas members. Whenever Yesenia captured a Zetas member, she didn't show any mercy and chose the most inhuman way to finish them off. A video surfaced on the internet, spread by the Gulf Cartel members. It showed Yesenia taking out a Zetas member. No one knows the actual record date or location of the incident, but the contents of the video were gruesome. A Los Zetas member was tied down, with the Gulf Cartel members surrounding him. Yesenia was also there. A senior member of the cartel demonstrated how to dismember a human, and Yesenia seemed to follow the instructions happily. After she was done with the job, she joyously carried the head and showed it off to her fellow mates and the camera. The hit woman got her nickname after cutting off the head of a Los Zetas member and removing the skin from his face with a sharp razor. This video brought Yesenia to the limelight. In 2012, another video released by the Gulf Cartel showed an interrogation of Los Zetas members. The video had a brutal and tragic end. 5 men were stripped and made to kneel on the ground, with Gulf Cartel members recording the incident. The men had the letter Z painted on their torso. As the interrogation went on, the man behind the camera asked them who had sent them there. The men replied, Z40. Z40 was the code name for one of the notorious leaders of Los Zetas, Miguel Trevino Morales. The Zetas had turned violent beyond imagination under his reign. He is, to date, considered one of the most brutal cartel leaders ever. After the victims said their leader's name, the voice behind the camera addressed the Zetas and told them that this was the end they would meet if they ever came to find the Gulf Cartel members again. And then, the 5 victims were violently beheaded. They screamed in pain, but weren't shown mercy. What's worse is that the man behind the camera praised the work of the executioner and said, "Very good." The more powerful Yesenia grew, the more brutality she demonstrated. This was a disadvantage as she had begun to draw more attention to herself. The rival cartels, especially Zetas members, were curious about her, and they wanted to remove her from their path as soon as possible. And the day came soon. Los Zetas finally managed to get their hands on Yesenia, and what they did to her was beyond horrific. In 2014, members of Los Zetas released a video online. The video had 4 women in it, all on their knees, 3 without any clothes on the upper body. Zetas members clad in their uniforms stood behind the 4 women. They were armed to the teeth. The video doesn't mention when and how these 4 women were captured. It also doesn't mention where the video was recorded, but it's possible that the women were passing through rival territories when they were captured. 3 out of these 4 women were young, and the 4th was an elderly lady. At first glance, it was unclear whether she was with the other 3 women or if she was related to any cartel. One might also wonder how a woman of her age ended up there and why she was a part of this interrogation. The women remained calm, but the tension was visible in their demeanor. The masked men began interrogating the women one after the other. They asked the names of each woman, their affiliations with the cartel, and what their roles were. One of the 4 women announced herself as Yesenia Pacheco. She also accepted that she was a member of the Gulf Cartel. The other 3 women also answered the questions truthfully. All 4 women accepted that they had affiliation with notable leaders in the Gulf Cartel. Even worse, the woman on the far left in the video said that she was the niece of a Gulf Cartel leader. The 2nd and 4th women mentioned that they were working as falcons or watchers and supplying information to their bosses. The masked members of Los Zetas asked more questions. They ensured that the victims weren't hiding anything. Of course, they were armed, and the victims ran the risk of being gunned down at the slightest sign of treachery. But even so, the Los Zetas members continued to verify the answers provided by the helpless women. The 4 women were also forced to give away the hierarchy of the Gulf Cartel. According to them, the leaders were at the top and oversaw major projects and trafficking operations. Next came the commanders, who were in charge of individual territories. They took care of all operations within their specified areas. After that came officers and foot soldiers who were in charge of dirty deeds and day-to-day operations.
Halcones were special units that worked outside of the cartel to collect information. After the interrogation was over, the Los Zetas members removed the heads of all 4 women. The victims showed unmatched strength during the process. None of the women made a noise as the cartel members attacked them. They were calm and didn't beg mercy, as if they had accepted their fates when they were captured. Their body parts were found days later.
La Guerra lived the same fate that she dealt to other criminals. The Zetas cut her throat with a large knife and let her suffer for a few minutes, before finishing her off for good. Her body was distributed in different points of the land, as well as those of the other 3 criminals who were kidnapped with her. After the video leaked online, everyone learned that one of the strongest female narco bosses of all time had been brutally murdered. It was a great blow to her team, but the Gulf Cartel resumed operations like nothing had happened. The gruesome footage was examined by many viewers online several times. While many pointed out that the person in the video didn't match the appearance of Yesenia, some mentioned that she looked plain without makeup, and that's why she was unrecognizable. Another person pointed out that her hair color also didn't match. Yesenia was blonde, whereas the woman in the video had darker hair color. Her tattoos also didn't match. Ed Fenzer said in YouTube comments, "Isn't Yesenia Pacheco Ramirez, La Guerra Loca, on that video? Age, face, and weight also not matches, and she had more tattoos, not only at the neck." Another viewer said in YouTube comments, "Which one was Yesenia Pacheco Ramirez? None of them look like her, plus she's blonde." Some other viewers commented that Los Zetas had gotten Yesenia long before this video had come out, and had eliminated her years earlier, but no one could prove anything. Another viewer pointed out that Yesenia herself had confirmed her identity in the video. The years Yesenia spent in the cartel were cut short by her rivals, but the stories of her brutality will likely live on forever. Many call her early demise a stroke of karma, while many consider her as a victim of Los Zetas' brutality. Neither the Gulf Cartel nor the Los Zetas is operating today, but the cartels that emerge from their broken factions are carrying on their names and acts of brutality. Mexicans are waiting for this nightmare to be over, but no one really knows how much they have to sacrifice to get to that point. What did you think about the life of Yesenia Pacheco? Do you think that she's one of the most brutal female narco lords out there? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching the video. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel.